Hello, PyOhio. Today I'm going to talk to you about doing everything data without leaving the Jupyter notebook. First, hi, I'm Alex. Professionally, I'm a data person. Actually, at my job, I'm a software engineer, but I work on a data engineering team. I kind of just do everything data. Like, I care about data validation, data quality. I think about the metrics of my team and other teams. I think about dashboarding. I think about data mining. I think about building high quality data sets. I think about a lot of things. It's what I do, even outside of my job. And kind of the focus today is around Jupyter notebooks. One of the probably nicest tools of the bunch, and is kind of the tool that allows me to do a lot of things. Like if I want to do data validation, I'm probably going to open up the Jupyter notebook and actually do validation there, or modeling, or checking data quality, or building data sets, making sure everything's good, or even try to explore the data, maybe a little dashboarding. Jupyter notebooks are kind of the pinnacle of like what I usually do every single time when I'm just trying to mess around with data. And why are they so good? I think the answer is pretty simple. They're the quickest and kind of best interface to do experimentation, document things, and even visualize data. It has all these different components where I can run individual cells and repeat those cells ad hoc. I can easily write markdown and document things. I can easily generate visualizations and have them regenerate. It's very fast and flexible, and it's great even for the most novice users out there. But they have a limitation. I can write all this code to do all these things like prepare data, visualize it, but like there's no easy way to put that into production, make that happen on loop without having to strip down that notebook, take all the code and write Python scripts and Python libraries and on and on. But there's a way. That's what this talk is about. It's kind of centered around one library primarily, papermill. Papermill is a very simple library. It does two things, parameterization and execution, and that's it. And we'll go into how that works, but this has kind of been a known thing for a while and something that's been done in practice. The greatest example that's somewhat well known is by Netflix for actually doing a lot of innovation with notebooks and using papermill in their processes. Specifically, this blog post is probably one of the most infamous ones that they talk about how they do it, what's the rationale behind it, and actually name dropping papermill as one of the things they're using to achieve this outcome. And one of the probably interesting parts about this blog post is kind of like the things that they saw overlapping between like data scientists, data engineers, software engineers, data analysts. It was four primary things: data exploration, preparation, validation, and productionization. And that makes a lot of sense. You know, there are people like analysts, data scientists that do a lot of work of just preparing data, kind of looking at data engineers that actually are doing more validation and preparation. And then someone needs to then at the end take all that and productionize it, actually make it run and run smoothly at scale. And so, okay, this is kind of, you know, this is why I'm saying like doing everything data. This is kind of everything data. And so now the real question, how does papermill work? And so a good first stop to kind of start at is the notebook itself. How do I take any Jupyter notebook and make it into a notebook that papermill can do something with? In this example, I have two notebooks that I actually genuinely have and use with papermill. One is a data preparation notebook that is trying to transform data into more analytical form that makes it nicer for me later on. And then I have another notebook on the other tab that's just me trying to visualize things. What's happening in these notebooks is not really relevant to this talk. There's only one key thing that is relevant. This second cell that I have here, I have a comment saying these will get modified by papermill. I have a few parameters that might change. So data path, artifact directory, these are parameters that might change based upon if I'm using my local system or if these are actually running in a CI/CD job. And so how do we allow papermill to overwrite these parameters? Simple. You just on the cell add a tag. And here it is. Just I add a parameters tag, and that's it. And I'll mention these are not the only kind of parameters you can do. Another good example is maybe you have some kind of model or some like hyperparameter like parameters to use. So maybe like a model takes in some alpha. And so maybe in this cell you have alpha equals 1.0 and ratio equals something else, as another example. Once you do this, that's it for the notebook. The notebook is ready to be run in papermill. You've parameterized it. You might have to do additional work to parameterize your notebooks because these ones were already parameterized from the start, but that's it. So now how do we run it with papermill? There's two ways. One is through the CLI, and the other one's through a Python API. I'm going to show you how to do it through the Python API. The CLI will look pretty much almost exactly the same, just in the CLI way you would do it. And it's kind of really simple. You import papermill, you use this execute notebook function, you provide it an input notebook, so the notebook you want to run, an output notebook, this is where the output results and the run results will end up in, and then the last parameter is the parameters. And this is how we can actually override those parameters in that notebook. And so this is where I can override where the data is coming from. And in this example, it's like me trying to override some kind of model parameters or something that I want to like see how that experiment plays out, how the graph, maybe like the visualization and graphics change when I do k-means with some other parameter, something like that. I think one key thing to notice is that there is an output notebook, and this is required. There's no way to just say run the input notebook with these parameters and not output something. And so what does that actually look like in practice? So that data preparation notebook, this is what happens when I run it. And in fact, this is what happened after I run it on my local system. There's one key thing to notice. All it did was it inserts a cell after our parameters cell that we mark with parameters with the ones I've specified. So actually the data file is called raw survey data, and the path was whatever that path is. That's it. And then just runs the notebook and gives us an output notebook, and this is the actual output notebook. And there's some cool things about these output notebooks. One of them is just nice error message, which is like, it will actually put in bold and red, hey, papermill encountered error at this point in the notebook. Kind of nice to have. And you can also kind of use this output notebook as kind of like report generating, because it will generate all the graphics and everything. So why not have it as a way of like, I do each experiment, and each output notebook is kind of like a different experiment. And this is kind of the other nice thing, is you can probably use this as like an immutable record. So like every time you do a new experiment, it creates a new output notebook that you can always look back at, see the code, see all the visualizations, all the metrics and everything. It's really nice. And as you can see, papermill is really kind of stupidly simple. It does two things: a way to parameterize and just executes the notebook. That's it. So what's the catch? This is a big one. If you're not Netflix, you have to like really think about, maybe they're not great if you have engineering standards. So Netflix, does have engineering standards, and they do care about things. But like, if you're a normal person, like, you have to think about like, how do you do testing on a notebook? That's not very obvious. How about like code quality in general? Like if you're just a data scientist, data scientists are not usually trained as engineers. And so they sometimes don't write the best code. That's just a truth. And so sometimes that is actually good consideration to think about. That's why it only works on, maybe individual projects where you can actually have all that kind of care put into it. Or if you have a organization that actually can support it, like Netflix. And how they even do that is like, this is where the rabbit hole starts. There are libraries that actually exist, like MBQA, that actually allow you to do quality assurance and testing to actually kind of bring engineering standards in there. And the whole space for notebooks is kind of crazy, including a library where you can write Python libraries in Jupyter notebooks. There's so much more out there. But really, I think probably a good fundamental question is, should you be doing that? Maybe you shouldn't be doing everything in a notebook. But there's probably like a few things that are probably good to do in notebooks with papermill. And I think it's kind of going back to even the name of this talk, data. So data exploration, preparation, validating, reporting, transformation. These are kind of the nicest things to do in notebooks. They're very easily testable, very easy to understand. They're not doing anything too complex. I think this is where it kind of should be. And this is kind of where papermill and notebooks, Jupyter notebooks all kind of shine together. So I hope you learned something new today. And thanks for listening.